Hello and welcome back to another episode of the By the Farm podcast. And today I am so pleased that I have been joined by my friend, Jane Kelly.
This episode was made possible through the generosity of our supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to see videos and hear podcasts before everyone else, become a supporter of Liz Zorab on Patreon to support our work here at By the Farm.
Hello, Jane.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah.
Just let's put everything in context a bit. It's about 7 o'clock on a Monday evening. We've got tea and wine, not in the same glass. One of us has tea, one of us has wine, and we're not going to say who's got what.
I was going to say, guess who's got what? Yes, yes. We're purely wholesome here. But it's cold though, Liz.
It's very
really
cold.
cold. Well, yeah.
So we're in the middle of January, and Jane and I actually recorded a podcast conversation last week, which went out on her YouTube channel.
That's right.
And that was great fun. That was like, you asked me 10 questions, and I said there's going to be nothing that organised in our conversation. So
There never is. That's the best way, though, I find. That's the best way.
So, Jane, I met via the wonders of the gardening community on YouTube. And Jane's channel is called Jane's Growing Gardens. And if you haven't found her before, I'll leave links and everything in the information about this podcast. But Jane, let's start by can you explain a little bit where you are in the country? Let's hear about where you are, what your climate's like, and let's have a kind of picture, imagine of not literally where you are right at the moment, but generally.
No, so to give me a bit of context, I am actually probably as central as you can possibly be in, if not the UK, certainly in England, because I am in a place called Staffordshire. It's known as the Midlands. We're in the Midlands for that very reason, and it's it's probably about as far away as you can get from the coast anywhere in the country. It's our nearest coast is a good old 60 miles away either way, I think.
Nice.
But it's it's nice, but Mike loves the coast, which is why we ended up here. I don't know. So yes, it's probably you can't have it if you go west, and you can't have it if you go east, but it's beautiful. It's not a very dramatic county to live in, but it's rolling hills. It's generally quite mild. It's we're in zone 8B. So I think
that's the US equivalent, yeah?
That's So the US equivalent, I think, would be the coastal regions of the US, and all round about the same zone. So quite mildish weather. I mean, I was saying that it's cold. We are -4 outside at the moment, which to me is absolutely bitter. But for our US friends, that's laughable.
It is. However, also context, it's incredibly damp here. We live in an oceanic temperate climate, so it's always highly humid, which means that when it's cold, it's that kind of cold that it literally takes your breath away.
Yes.
And I was chatting to Lorella from Plan B Orchard, another YouTuber.
Yes.
And she has lived both in Alaska and down on the Gulf Coast in America.
Okay.
And she said that it was actually colder when it got cold. It was colder down in the Gulf than it was in Alaska because it was more humid.
Really? I've never considered that. So it's the dampness in the air
that makes it feel really cold.
Yeah.
So obviously Alaska is colder in terms of when you look at degrees on the but the feel is if you're in a very cold place and it's dry cold, it doesn't feel as cold as if it's a wet cold. So we actually have lose here in terms but there are advantages. There are advantages, aren't there, Jane? We have the Gulf Stream brings in warm temperatures, and it's never really hot and it's never really cold, says the woman who spent the last 2 years going, God, it's hot, and
I
I'm
know.
freezing.
But you know, though, that's really interesting you say that, because my parents used to go off to Tenerife every year, and on like a yearly annual excursion, and they'd come back and say, oh yes, it gets hot over there, but it's different. It's a dry heat. And you could put up with it. So whereas the temperatures could be that much hotter, it didn't matter, because again, yeah, like you're saying, when it's hot here, you've got the humidity as well, and I think
Yeah.
that's what is all,
Oh,
you know.
years ago, so many years ago, I went to Florida in August. It's very
Oh,
cheap. It's very cheap to go to Florida in August.
oh, yeah.
Because
Is there a reason for that, Liz?
there might be, and it's because we had 97, 98, and even 100% humidity,
Oh
as
my
well
God.
as it being incredibly hot. And it was just like breathing a sponge. It was
Oh. But good oranges, good
well,
for the oranges, you know. There's swings and roundabouts wherever you go.
this is what I like about Jane. She will find the positive in almost everything.
You have got to, yeah. So yes, so complaining about the cold, not as cold as a lot of places, but by heck, I took my dog out for a good long walk earlier on, and I feel like my fingers are still cold.
Yeah.
That was
So
absolutely
if you're
brilliant.
joining us from anywhere other than the UK,
Mm.
you'll see how most people in the UK are kind of slightly obsessed with the weather. It is one of our main topics of conversation.
It is. It
And
is.
mostly we moan about it. It's
Yeah.
like we have it, it's too cold, it's too wet, it's too windy, and then suddenly it's too hot. And somewhere in between that, there's like a week where we go,
Yeah.
this is quite nice, isn't
Isn't
it?
it? And then after that week is gone, we completely deny it ever happened. And it's always a case of, well, we haven't had anything. We haven't had anything. Well, let's put it this way, Liz. We've been talking for 10 minutes and we're still talking about the weather. So there you go. We're quite representative.
So one of the things we were chatting about the other day is how there are things that you wanted to learn, and it made me realize that how gardening practices change over time. So I thought I would talk to you about, if you want to cast your mind back, if you'd like to share with us how long you've been gardening.
Ooh, okay, right, okay.
I suspect
Gardening.
it's quite a long time.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah. Yeah, it's, well, it depends. Do you mean gardening as in general, or do you mean gardening on an allotment plot and growing vegetables?
I mean, actually gardening, just
Gardening,
gardening.
I mean, again, going back to living at home with my parents in the last century, it was yeah, so in my teens they were all very keen gardeners, until very recently of being able to keep up their garden absolutely beautifully. So I was always surrounded by people who were, you know, they were always interested in making the garden nice and everything. And yeah, so we're talking about, let me see, when they had their garden, they eventually allowed me to have a little spot of my own.
Yeah.
And I grew radish, and it's the only time I think I've ever grown decent radish. And that must be, let me see now, that must be getting on for 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And then, as I say, then growing up through my teens, I was just always, the garden was just always a nice place to be. And I didn't really take too much interest in it until I moved away from home. And I suddenly realized that where I was living didn't have a garden. It had a paved back, it was a Victorian terrace, and a typically very long paved area as a backyard. And there was no green and there were no trees. And for me, that was a shock, because whenever I'd looked out of a window, not a huge grand garden, but I'd seen green and I'd seen trees. And so my first thing was, we've got to do something about this. We've got to get pots out there. We've got to get bulbs in there. And I remember actually we took up some slabs. It was probably completely the wrong thing to do. And I do apologise with hindsight to the landlord, but we took up slabs along one side of the yard. And I can't even remember what we put in there. It must have probably just been the rough soil underneath. And I put tulips in. just to have something, to see something growing. And it's only when you look back now you think, why did I do that? You know, I can't imagine any of the
I'll tell you
students
exactly
saying,
why you did that. It's because you do what you can, and if that's the space you've got, that's the space you'll use.
Absolutely it. And then it's but you know, it must have obviously been ingrained in me as a child that, you know, that's what a garden should be, green, or you should look at and you should see something grow. And from then, whenever we've had a space, we have, you know, made an area. We moved into a flat and it was a very nice square backyard. And the first thing I thought was, oh, that's nice and square. There was a building site around the corner, and we didn't take the building materials, but where they'd knocked down a few buildings, we certainly took some of the broken brick and things like that, and we built a little retaining wall, filled it with whatever we could, and just absolutely planted it really densely. And that was beautiful. But then children come along, life takes a bit of a turn, you've got other priorities, and it's only really it's exactly the last 8 years that I've actually been doing allotment gardening in the way that I am now. We've had a couple of allotments along the way, but again, it wasn't the right time in my life
So
to be able to keep them up.
Have you always gardened organically?
Yes.
Ooh, you went up on me.
No, I'm saying that apart from when I lived at home, because my job was to go out, and again, these are all funny little memories you don't think of until someone asks a specific question. My job was to get the sprayer, what do you call them? The light sprayer.
Yeah, you're doing a really good pump action
sprayer.
The pressures, yeah.
Pressure sprayer. And I would be the one to go out and spray the roses in mum and dad's garden because they love their roses. And I do remember really, really being very pleased with myself because there was a particular smell to whatever this chemical was. And you could see how you'd coated the whole rose because it would drip. It would just absolutely drip off, and it was like left a bit of a milky residue. And I'd find it really satisfying that I cover the whole rose. And it's only looking back now and thinking, what on earth was in that spray? You know, and it's, you know, I've spent about the last 20 years trying to get mum and dad not to use spray on their garden, but it worked.
My parents used a whole cacophony of lotions, potions, poisons, and things.
Yeah.
No, we had creosote on the fence.
Oh, yes.
That stunk, didn't it? So creosote tar stuff on the fence.
I bet the fence is still standing though.
Probably. And then yes, the rose clear stuff to spray the roses. For not only for aphids, but then a different spray to deal with the black spot.
Oh yeah, a fungicide.
And then there were little blue pellets for the slugs everywhere.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's been until very recently, hasn't it? The blue pellets.
Yes.
People still have those pellets in their sheds. The ones that I don't think they're allowed to sell them anymore in the UK.
So they're not allowed to sell them with whatever it was on it, but I think they can still sell the ferrous oxide ones, which are just the iron. Have I got that right? It's ferrous iron, yes.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So I think you can still get those, but I think people have become much more conscious that if you feed a slug something that's toxic, then you're also poisoning anything that eats that slug.
Absolutely. And again, looking back to our parents' generations and generations before that, they were going on advice that they were given. Yes. And that's what we all do. We all soak up advice that we were giving. And the advice was, yes, the priority is for you to get a good crop or some good flowers, you know, and they were in isolation. They were treated in isolation. They weren't treated as part of the bigger picture of the garden. You know, the food chain, that wasn't recognized in the same way. And like you're just saying, the slug will affect the bird, will affect, you know, whatever catches. And we've now gained the recognition of that much more. I would hope. Yes, I think we are all generally.
I think there is. I think that change is really quite slow. I mean, when you think Jeff Hamilton was introducing organic methods on Gardener's World,
Mm.
40 years ago.
I was going to say, that's scary, isn't it? 40 years ago. Yeah, yeah, I know.
And yet there are still people who choose to garden using those chemicals.
Is it a generational thing, though? Is it just a case of it's the older generations now?
No, I don't think it is.
Do you think it's...
So
You see,
I
find that quite funny.
I talk to people who are in their early 30s,
Mm,
and they are just like, just get the weed killer out, just get the bug spray
right.
out.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And what can I spray on this?
I find,
Affection, love.
yeah, I know. But yes, you do find yourself though, and it's difficult to judge because you tend to talk to people who use the same practices as yourself.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's an echo chamber, isn't it? And we're all agreeing. And it's when you hear someone outside that you think, oh, hold up. But everyone's doing it for what they think is the right reason.
Yes.
And it could be that in years to come, people are going to say, this organic nonsense. It was never going to work, and it might be the stage where we're all relying on our food so much that everything else is by the by, and we'll have to concentrate on the singular isolated crops again. Let's hope not. Let's hope not. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it is really interesting to see how practices have changed. I was looking on a Facebook group, so not your Facebook group, on another one, I will say. And somebody was talking about getting ready for the next growing season. And they were saying, as soon as the frost has lifted, they will be double digging their garden. And I kind of went, because the idea of digging, let alone double digging, I find incredible. But I know people still do it. It's just, as you say, I mean, actually, most of my friends don't dig.
It's tradition. In a lot of ways, a lot of the people who are doing it will have learned from someone before them. Yep. And that's the way you do things. And it's not...
Jane, actually, having said that, there is something really nice about looking at a garden that has just been neatly turned over. But the thing is, we can replicate that by putting a new layer of compost over stuff.
Yeah, on top.
But I've got to say, there have been times I've looked at people's photographs of their neatly dug gardens, and I've just thought, doesn't that look nice? And then I go out into my garden with the jumble of chaos of weed seeds and everything. And it's like, no, actually, I like this too.
I know. Well, if we walk down the lane to the allotment, we've got quite a long, it's like a little country lane going between allotments. So there's allotments on either side. And it's lovely because there's hedges that may be about 5 foot, 6 foot tall, but where you can see over the top as you go down, you can have a good old nose into people's allotments on either side. I would say roughly half have either been dug over or rotavated. And it's when you see the rotavated, they look spanking new. They really do. And then again, you get to ours at the end. And I was up there yesterday. I hadn't been for a few weeks. There's bits of cardboard down that haven't been covered with any compost yet or any manure yet. The manure isn't the same colour as the compost or the leaf mould. There's all these different layers, and it looks a bit of a mess, but it's trying to see the bigger picture, isn't it? It's
absolutely. Now, I'm going to ask you if you don't mind pausing just for 2 seconds.
I don't mind at all.
Yeah, no, I needed to go and get a biscuit to go with my cup of tea.
Well, you've got to get your priorities right, Liz. That's oh, you've given away who's drinking the wine now.
To go with my glass of wine.
Though, Liz, just going back to the saying about the digging and the rotavating, when we first took on the allotment we're on at the moment, which is 5 years ago now, because it was in such a state, we rotavated. We actually bought a rotavator, and for that very first, I was not even the season, the first few months that we were there, to get it in a tip-top order, as we thought, we rotavated it. And shortly
I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
If you've got really compacted soil and you need to get a crop from it pretty quickly, then you do
Yeah.
what you need to do. And that might be digging, it might be double digging, and it might be
Yeah.
rotivating. Or it
Yeah.
might just be laying down cardboard and growing, putting a really deep layer of compost on top.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't think there's any, I don't have any beef with anyone doing whatever they need to do to prepare something.
Absolutely.
It's none of my
Yeah.
business what they do. So,
No. No.
I try
And you've
not
got to
to
do
kind
what
of,
suits you.
yeah,
You know, if you've got a really, really clay soil, I would recommend 10 times out of 10 that you do no dig. But if you've got a nice friable soil, well, I don't know. You have got to do what's best for you, and try not to try things out. You know, try things out. You've got to see what works for you. I think it's very difficult in this day and age. In some ways, I was talking before about people going from advice that they were given at the time, and you would have looked for advice and you might have gone to, I don't know, a more experienced person, an older member of the family, the library. Whereas now we are inundated with advice from all sides, and it can be really, really difficult to know which way to go. And I think the best thing you can do with that is just try things out and go with what suits you. You know,
I think
don't be
one of the other difficulties is there's an awful lot of information on social media that's being shared by people who are still very new to gardening. So they're sharing this shiny new idea, and I'm so pleased that they are, but that information isn't necessarily tried and tested.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's worth, you know, the best gardeners I've known are the people who've been gardening for ever and a day, and go, oh yeah, I tried that for 25 years. It didn't really work. So, you know, I've tried something else for the next 15 years, and I like that better.
That's exactly it though, Liz. They've tried it and it hasn't worked. They haven't just said, oh no, I read in a book that wouldn't work, so I didn't do it. They've tried it. And I think that's what people are, especially when you're starting out, people are a little bit frightened, or can be a little bit frightened of doing something wrong, you know. And it's obviously your experience builds over time and you'll pick bits up from different people. But unless you try it, you won't know. And what works for someone else might not necessarily work for you.
Yeah,
but you won't unless you give it a go. You know, so I don't know if I could grow anything in where you are in Wales, on the side of that mountain with the rain, the fact that you produce stuff, the fact that you go out when it's cold and wet. I think hats off to you. So
So I have been out in the garden this afternoon. I had a friend over. You know how it's actually, I think gardening is easier with two people. Not necessarily the same person your entire life, but so when you've got friends come over and there's that rush of enthusiasm. So a friend came over today, and we have weeded half the veg beds. Wow. So we've left all the stems of last year's growth, so there's still seeds and for birds, there's still places for insects to hide, but we've got rid of all the grass, all the couch grass, all the hairy bittercress, creeping buttercup, and a lot, I mean, like a stupid amount of rose bay willow herb seedlings.
Oh right, okay.
So beds now look, so they don't look empty because they've got stuff in them, and they've also got an awful lot of forget-me-not seedlings in them.
Oh, but they're lovely though.
Yeah, well, they will be when they're not just.
Yeah.
But and it's just that whole thing of just had some fresh air. It was bitterly cold, so it was great while sun was out.
Yeah.
But as soon as the sun went down, it was like,
oh. But you've made it into more of a social occasion there rather than a chore. It's something that you're sharing with you, whether your friend liked it or not. That's a different matter. You won't be seeing them again in a hurry. But it does. It puts a different slant on it, doesn't it? You know,
it does. And do you know, one of the things that I really like is that most of my gardening friends have also got a wonderfully well-developed sense of the ridiculous and sense of humor. And I think humor in the garden is a really important thing.
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely. Well, you know, in any walk of life,
Yes.
it's, let's face it, because things are rarely straightforward, and especially sometimes that can be absolutely magnified in a garden, can't it? You know, so
Well, you kind of, I think there is that thing about you've got a choice. You can laugh or you can cry with most of it. It's
absolutely,
um
absolutely. I know, I know.
but one of my friends expresses her humour in her garden through the use of garden gnomes.
I love them.
Okay, so I think so you're either a gnome person or you're not.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There's
and so
gnomes and there's gnomes.
I'm known a gnome person. I'm a not gnome. I'm not a misnomer. No, no, no.
No, 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 no
No,
gnomes.
no gnomes. But I know
No.
people do really like them and they find
Yeah, yeah. It's I get it's adding your stamp of personality though, isn't it? It's I will say I will put my foot down, and but it did make me laugh when I saw it in one of the bargain stores we have over here in the UK. It was either last year or the year before. There seemed to be a proliferation of like 4-foot gnomes in garishly bright colours. And I was thinking, come on now, who's going to have them in their garden? But then I had to question myself, because I thought, if that is going to make that person happy, if that is going to make them enjoy their garden, you know, good, let them do what they want. We shouldn't all have to conform to what we
oh
all
no,
think is
absolutely.
the
Wouldn't it
right
all be
way to do.
boring?
I know.
Wouldn't
But
it be boring? And we'd all
yeah.
have to go around to each other's houses and do weeding.
You say about the rose bay willow herb, just sorry, going back to the weeds, we seem to every year we have an absolute ridiculous amount of sycamore seedlings, and they all seem to
Mm.
gather in the guttering for the polytunnel. And I'm talking thousands. And can we find a sycamore tree near us? No, we can't see one
Wow.
unless it's disguised as something else. We can't see
So
one,
they're
but
travelling in the wind some
they
distance.
must be. They must be ungathering. They are so prolific, though. It's
Do you
crazy.
think they're all waiting up there, just waiting for enough friends to come along so they can
I
just
yeah,
land on your
I
polytunnel?
turn my back and they land all at once. They probably in that lovely little helicopter way that they do. You know, like something out of the greatest, no, not the greatest escape, but one of the war films where all the things come down. Yeah, yeah. But it's yeah. It is very odd. But yes, we all have our weeds. But your creeping buttercup, isn't that meant to be a good sign? Because you can tell from your weeds what your soil is like, can't you?
Well,
And I think
I'm just
buttercup's
going to
meant
say
to be a
it's
good.
just a nuisance because
Yeah.
we've got a big garden. We've got and the veg garden's right next to it's kind of dumped in the middle of a field.
Mm,
So
mm.
so we've got all sorts of weeds that we don't necessarily want in amongst
Yeah,
our
yeah.
plants. So I just have this kind of constant. I toe a really fine line between thinking, oh, I'll just chop everything out, just go
Yeah,
scorched
yeah.
earth, or I what usually happens, and what always happens is I then get down on my hands and knees and I hand weed it slowly.
There is something satisfying about that, though, isn't there?
When it's done, yes, yes, really,
But
really
when you
satisfying.
get, like you were saying, couch grass, when you get a couch grass weed, because they're awful, aren't they? They just break. The creeping
Mm.
buttercup, they just break. And you know you're not going to get the whole thing. But when you pull a weed out and it comes out really steadily, and you know, but you're pretty darn sure you've got the whole thing, how good is that?
Oh no,
I
that's
dream
excellent.
about
That's
that.
just
That's just so nice. That's so nice.
next time that happens to me, I'll take a photo of it and send it to you so you can.
It's okay. So I'll believe you. Oh
But no,
dear.
listen, you have been very busy recently.
Mm.
Um, you have not only been gardening and doing family stuff and everything, but you've started writing as well, haven't you?
Oh, Liz, I have absolutely loved it. Yeah, I submitted an article to Kitchen Garden magazine, which I know it's widely available in the UK, and it's one of those
Mm.
magazines that I love because it's down to earth. And I know that you, with amateur gardening, Liz, have
Mm-hmm.
said the same about that. I think they're very similar in that they show readers' gardens, they show what real people put up within their garden, as opposed to maybe a more glossy type coffee table magazine.
Mhm.
And I've had the privilege to write for them. I've just submitted my 4th article to them last week. And
Jane's
I've
got the writing
absolutely,
bug. Yay!
I have, but isn't it wonderful though? Because even with videos, with me, they're not scripted. I have a rough idea what I'm going to say. I usually don't say it and end up going somewhere else, you know, and off on a tangent. But with the writing, it's lovely because you can put it down. You can go away and think about it. That you come back, you can tweak it a bit. You can, you know, then I don't know about you, Liz, but me, middle of the night, I think, oh, I know. And it's seeing it come together and that whole thing just, the whole picture comes together. And that feeling when you finished it of satisfaction is just, I've got the bug. I really, really enjoy it. It's lovely, you know.
Congratulations.
I mean,
the thing is, it's one of those things you never know where it's going to lead.
No, I know. I mean, I don't think I've got a book in me, Liz. I know you've got yours. But maybe
you might have, Jane, without knowing it.
I know, you know. But I don't know. Yeah. I'm just saying
yeah.
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 I genuinely love it. And I'm terrible at blowing my own trumpet, I'll be honest, but it is something that I'm really proud of this last year.
I hope that phrase is known worldwide. It means it means that we're a bit too modest. We're not very good at bragging about what we do. And Jane, you know, what you've been doing both on YouTube and in your writing, but more importantly, on your plot and in your garden, are fantastic.
Yeah. You just got on with things.
She says, yes.
Yes. But you just get on with it, you know, and it's ultimately we garden for ourselves. I think we would both agree that yes, we do the YouTube videos, but we would not just have chosen a random thing to do a YouTube video about. We do it about gardening because we love gardening.
Yeah.
And we love the lifestyle and we love everything that goes with it. And I know with you, with the permaculture, and I love all that. I love seeing the bigger picture. It's all part of something. And hopefully that comes across in the videos and in what we do. Because I know there are channels out there where they're clearly not, you know, they've thought about doing a YouTube channel before the gardening, if you like. And it doesn't quite come across the same way. And I think that's a sharp learning curve.
Jane, we're going to have to wrap up because we're about to run out of time. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. It always is. Yeah, I think I'm sorry if I haven't stuck to topic, Liz, but this is what happens when I end up talking to you. We just go completely off and round the houses.
Well, that's okay. It just means we'll do it again another time.
Yeah,
I'm going to say cheers because I've got my cup of something and you've got your cup of something.
Yes,
you've still got some left.
I do very well.
So Jane's Growing Garden is available on YouTube. You can find her on Facebook, Instagram and elsewhere. You can find her column in Kitchen Garden magazine. And Jane, thank you so much for being not only a great friend, but an absolutely wonderful guest on this podcast.
Thank you so much, Liz. That's lovely.
The podcast you've been listening to is a Byther Farm production. All rights reserved.